Accurate.
Internet clock. Okay. We have a thumbs up back there.
Great.
So I will call this special meeting of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Commission to order. The next item on our agenda is approval of minutes. The draft minutes from December 3rd, 2025, which were included in your packet. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion second. Any discussion on those minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Minutes are approved. Item number 3 is public appearances for non-agenda items. We have a member of the public with us, but has not signed up for the ability to hear for just 2 agenda items. So we can then move on to agenda item number 4A, which is resolution R-174-25, approval of the City of Fitchburg Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan 2025 update.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We do have a registrant here.
Was that a second? Sorry, by Jim or by Brandon?
Brandon.
Okay, thanks.
We have a member of the public here who wishes to speak. So Steve, I'll invite you forward.
Thank you. Steve Arnold, 2530 Targhee Street, representing Bike Fitchburg and the Wisconsin Bike Fed. First, I would point out that I am on what I thought was a steering committee, but it was apparently a one-time thing. It would have been good to just be able to join the discussion rather than be restricted to 3 minutes. The list of changes proposed and rejected was very hard to read, so I don't have a printout. I did bring my computer in case I have to refer to it. Many of the proposed improvements were dismissed with the reason of content preference not critical to change should have been submitted during the draft stage for staff and consultant review. I wonder what was the draft stage? Was that the text-only version that we discussed in August? Why was a referral draft issued if no changes could be made? And whose preferences are paramount? It seems like there's a strong staff preference for no change. Our objective, speaking for Bike Fitchburg, is to get as many good things in the plan as possible and therefore have goals and guideposts for the next 5 years, or if staff suggestion stands, the next 10 years. And it appears that only typographical changes and other minor additions were allowed. I'll just cover a couple of things that I was concerned about. We suggested that the plan reference the Active Wisconsin agreement that the Chamber and the City and Bike Fitchburg entered into in 2017. And the comment was that we'll reference that resolution, but we need to make clear that it was a 2017 partnership and nothing active is going on. Many parts of the city government continue to cooperate with Bike Fitchburg and the Chamber, and we refer to that agreement often. It was never intended to be a one-year agreement. I don't know where that came from. Has the city informed 1,000 Friends of Wisconsin that they're withdrawing from Active Wisconsin. I was concerned about the photo that showed a continuous rumble strip, which is not a best practice. The comment was that they didn't have a photo of that. I found one in 30 seconds on the Federal Highway Rumble Strip Implementation Guide. Let's see, which way is this camera? So there is such a photo. The Bicycle Committee on page 87 was formalized. If you like, you could call it the ad hoc Bicycle Committee, but it was formalized because when I was mayor, I established it as an ad hoc committee. There was a comment for page 99 that we shouldn't put anything in there about enforcement because of parking lanes using the bike lane uprising geodatabase of violations. So that database is of time and geo-stamped photographs of violations, and I wonder what kind of data would be considered objective to guide enforcement. There was a comment about ProWag, that the department is, Public Works Department is moving ahead with a plan to implement ProWag. And so I ask if that is, if a department's plan to do something means that it should not be in the plan. And on page 100, there was a comment that we could have a policy to allow bikes on sidewalks. You could have a policy, but it would be ineffective under the state statute. The state statute requires an ordinance, so that's why I called that out. So those are some of the things that I got from Phil's table, and I leave it for you to decide what to do with any of those things. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from the commission for Steve?
In addition to my Bike Fitchburg report, I could characterize what happened at the Transportation Commission because no one else on this meeting was at that meeting.
If you wouldn't mind, I mean, I watched it, but was
Okay.
not physically there, but if you.
Well, for those on this commission, basically the concern was that substantive changes would not be accepted and that that the main goal seemed to be to have a plan and not to improve the plan at this stage. So that's why they recommended approval.
Should I give an overview? Go ahead. Yeah, okay. Thanks, Steve. So first, just kind of the standard overview. You also saw this plan in December. After Bike and Ped Commission voted to table their decision on the plan, Community Equity Committee came to a similar decision. It was kind of a tough spot that they were in because they weren't formed formally as a committee when this plan started, so they weren't able to be engaged in the drafting of the plan. I had sent a draft of it to Equity last January and got a few comments back that we tried to incorporate, but we weren't able to kind of more formally work with them, so they just felt that there needed to be more equity-related metrics, and without those being in there, they couldn't really vote yes on it, so Equity also tabled their vote. Following that, Transportation Transit did vote to approve the plan. I did speak with Ross, and it wasn't so much about substantive changes, it was that there's not really capacity at this point. The consultant is no longer participating, the budget is gone, and the sense is that council and the mayor would like to have this passed and not delay the process further. So it wasn't about not wanting to make improvements, just so much that at this point it's kind of passing the plan and directing staff to make critical changes as noted versus delaying the completion of the plan for an uncertain period of time longer. And so this is, from what I heard from the staff contact and from him speaking with the sitting holder as well. I will say there was a draft period. It started in August. It was a text-only version of the plan, but it also included all of the maps and figures and tables. There was a 2-week period to provide feedback. We did not receive any of this feedback at that time. When you reached out at the end of September and said you hadn't participated, we gave you another opportunity to provide edits. You again didn't provide anything. So we got 2 days with 10 pages of edits and comments 2 days before Bike and Ped was scheduled to vote. And at that point, we had gone through a long process with staff, with the consultant, with the planning team, when there were back and forth conversations going on, and we had more of a chance to discuss. I wouldn't suggest that none of these changes would improve the plan, but it's that there was a months-long period to incorporate more content changes that we didn't get these comments. And so once we got to the point of December and had 10 pages of comments, staff deliberated over a number of these things and picked out what we think is critical to include in the plan. You can't have a decent bike and pedestrian plan if you don't include these edits, and we did our best to include all those things if it was really critical or if it would be improve the plan and also be relatively minor change. And so that's what these that's what this spreadsheet reflects, is what are the things that we felt would be the most doable to still incorporate into the plan, improve the plan without this now drawing the process out into May, June, when there are other critical things that we all have in our roles also to continue with. We know that from city leadership there's a desire to be done with this process. We had a budget, we had a scope, and we have exhausted the budget and followed that scope as was laid out. So we're definitely not intending to minimize anything or exclude anybody. I certainly can look at the lingo on that Act of Wisconsin together. It was a conversation with a city leadership member that I put somewhat inartfully in the spreadsheet there. It's not so much that there isn't an ongoing partnership with Bike Fitchburg and the city, but the Act of Wisconsin together. I'd be interested in discussing with you what the scope of that was and the ongoing nature of partnering specifically through that versus more broadly partnering as organizations, which has continued. Yeah, that's kind of the only kind of setup and preface that I think is needed. But that is, sorry, one more thing. The Common Council did, of course, vote to delay their vote last week to give Bike and Ped Commission time to reschedule a meeting to have their vote. They will be voting on it next Tuesday. I will probably again request that they add a whereas or therefore clause that simply directs staff to make critical changes before publishing the final plan. But I anticipate that council is going to vote to approve the plan.
Is there discussion from the commission? Kelly?
I am wondering if there's a chance that we could approve for now, but also write it, change the way we do things so that every year we are doing small updates or edits as necessary, so that there's not one huge document that we decide on once and then just implement as is for the next 5 or 10 years before we get a chance to make any small changes that seem appropriate or necessary. That's what they do with the comprehensive plan, right? For the city, they look at it a couple times a year. Joe, you would know that.
Doesn't the comp plan make like there's minor amendments that are made. And those are usually voted on, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, that's what I'm proposing, that we treat our bike and ped plan in that way, so that if we see there need to be changes, especially because we're such a growing city, that things will be changing majorly in terms of new neighborhoods and lots of new infrastructure coming on. It feels like being able to respond to those changes as they occur rather than waiting 5 or 10 years and then going back and say, hey, here's what we wish would have happened or should have happened.
Well, I would say I think that Mark set a pretty good example of how to handle that over the last few years as chair, that he was not waiting for, wasn't waiting for a plan update to go through a couple times a year and say, hey, here's the priorities, here's what's in the plan, we need to review this, and here are additional priorities. I think Andy's continued to do that as well. So it's certainly, the Bike and Ped Commission is not restricted to only work on what is in the plan. The plan is more about what are the priorities for bicycling and how do we want to address those. But if we add a new neighborhood, just because it's not in the plan doesn't mean we don't look at improving bike and pedestrian infrastructure there. If new federal guidelines come down, our hands aren't tied because it's not in the plan. And that's something that I think is really important to remember. That something not being in the plan does not mean it doesn't get addressed or become an area of focus. And something being in the plan, as we all know, doesn't necessarily mean that it is going to be a top 3 priority over the next couple of years. So that's still something that, the Bike and Ped Commission should certainly be looking at the plan and trying to help implement it and looking at it for guidance on ongoing conversations and work. But it is not an all-encompassing, the be-all end all set of commandments. But I think that point is taken, that certainly over the coming years, looking at considering modifications. I don't know if it would be to the document itself, but certainly discussing, whether the top 3 things we see from the plan this year still apply next year.
And I guess to Kelly's point, if there is a new neighborhood, I think we could do an addendum to it if we wanted to say, this map's out of date. Could we do an addendum and say, here's the new map, here's how this incorporates into it? I think there could be maybe necessarily modifying the plan itself, but could there be some way to report what we're doing to? It is somewhat of a living document.
I could check with admin on if there's a process for doing something like that would more kind of officially add an addendum to the plan, or if it would just be create a new map and link to it on the website, which we can do anytime. The plan doesn't restrict us from adding documents and maps and things to the website. So if something needs to be updated, doing that.
My concern is that doing it all at once as a huge update from the previous plan feels a little overwhelming, I think, for a lot of folks. And if, as we see there need to be changes, we make those changes through, each year, if that's part of what we do as our commission, it would never feel quite so overwhelming as what we just went through.
Yeah, this is Jim. I would kind of agree with kind of an annual update. Hey, we're looking at this once a year. Hey, what major changes do we need? What major updates do we need? And also making this available to the public. I mean, I think the public needs to know the plan as well, needs to have an accurate copy of the plan as well. And, if we kind of say, hey, we're going to do an annual update, I think multiple times a year might get a little bit much. But if we can do it, hey, January or some month, we say we're going to do an annual update, that would make a lot of sense.
I mean, I do like the idea of it being more of a living document and agree. I think Mark did do that with kind of bringing the plan and the action items back periodically throughout the course of the year, just to say what are our priorities. This is what was identified in the plan. So sort of to Phil's point of, we can keep reviewing things, making sure that the plan is what we want it to be. But then to Kelly's point of, like, if there are major changes in the city, or if there's some major, either change in the city or just kind of globally, again, thinking back when we first did this plan, like e-bikes weren't a thing and now they are. And if there's some major thing, even if we don't necessarily decide what it is, to at least address in some sort of a formalized process to say, this is a thing, here's kind of our interim recommendation on what we're doing with it. At some point, we'll do a larger revision of the plan. Yeah, at least have a starting point then, because we've been sort of cataloging as we go along. Yep. These are the things that need to change within it.
Just my comments here quick. I will echo, the desire to make this more of a living document. I think we're all on the same page as that, but focusing just a bit here back on what we have in front of us, the 2025 update. I spent some time reading through the 2017 plan and making a table of comparisons of, what's changed, some of the major themes. I really do think this 2025 update just represents a substantial step forward in clarity, equity, safety. It, in a lot of places, it moves us from a largely aspirational vision to a more actionable framework. And I think a lot of the design standards have been updated to what's modern, not just in Fitchburg, but at a national level. Just in general, I think this plan gives us a much clearer framework to work off of. Again, it's a baseline, it's a living document. It's not something we're writing into law here. It's to guide us on the projects we work on and how the city's growing. So, yeah, I'm all for getting this forward and getting this documented.
Any other comments, Mark or Joe?
I concur that this is something that we should continue to review, and I know Mark would, as chair, take pieces by pieces and cover them in meetings, and have us kind of in a digestible way break down certain parts of the plan. And I think that was a useful exercise, even to get us as a committee focused on what the plan says and be engaged in reading it. So I don't have much to add other than yes, it should continue to be a living document that we reference and not just something we put on a shelf.
Steve?
Yeah, concur with what Joe just said. The act of reviewing it annually is going to make sure that it doesn't get ignored. I think that looking at the comprehensive plan minor update analogy, it's, let's see, should do this. It's typically the map of future land uses that get updated. And I think that analogy holds for the bike and ped plan. It's the map and also the action items that would be likely to be updated. So you could recommend that a note be put in the map that this map may change and that the latest one will be found on the city website and provide a stable URL for it. You could, as a committee, a commission, undertake to devise a procedure where you say, every year in December we're going to do this, and every year in February we're going to do that, and that's our new process for reviewing the plan. And that's something you could adopt as your own committee rules of operation. So I think Kelly's has a very good idea.
That is something that the Resource Conservation Commission already does, is they kind of have an annual calendar of events, they call it. Each month, are there certain things that we know we're gonna talk about? So, there are certain months, because they always help coordinate the shred and recycling events on campus that happens in April and September every year. So they know at the preceding months they need to start talking about planning for that. Different review items that are regularly spaced. So, BPC, certainly we could talk about having things that we just know every November, every January. I've got the months off, December and February, we're in even months. But yeah, certainly we could create a little bit more of a regular schedule of items for certain meetings. And I would say one other analogy with the comp plan, I don't want to promise anything that I can't follow through on. The comp plan is supposed to be updated every 10 years. When I started 6.5 years ago, they were finishing up the latest comp plan update, and so I was just kind of marginally included at the tail end of it. Over the past couple of years, city leadership has agreed that it needed a sooner update than every 10 years, and so they're starting the process right now to update the comp plan again. So even though the directive is every 10 years, they're not waiting for that with this comp plan because they felt it was important enough to revise it and create a new comp plan for Fitchburg, so that's beginning this year. The same thing could happen with the bike and ped plan, that right now we've got in here a directive, it needs to be updated at least every 10 years. If after 5-6 years, there is a strong feeling from bike and ped, from the council and the budget available, there's nothing saying that it couldn't be done sooner, but that it needs to be done at least every 10 years.
Well, I guess that's part of where annual review would help. If we're doing an annual review of the plan and we have an addendum to it, if we're finding that it's relatively tame, there's not much to it, we're probably more on that 10-year cycle. If we have pages and pages of addenda to it and we're making frequent changes to it, then that would probably be the hint that we need to do something on a cycle a little sooner than 10 years.
I have one question for Steve. In terms of becoming a gold city, is there a rule that we have to update every 5 years, and would making it a living document so that it's constantly under revision satisfy that? Rather than, letting it be 10 years, but always being under revision, would that make the folks who make those decisions happy enough with us?
I'm sure that a regular review policy would be considered a great advantage for the city. I don't think that the Bike League is asking for 5 years. It may have been modified since the 2010 comp plan that I was most involved in, but I think that the every 5 years update of the bike and ped plan is coming from the comp plan. Now, staff, doesn't necessarily have to follow that, and they may recommend something different, or it might have been changed in the comp plan.
I'll just add on to that. There are very few requirements from the League of American Bicyclists vis-a-vis improving your bike-friendly community score. So I can read you directly from our last report card where they had 11 different items, I believe, 8, 9, 10, 11. They had 11 items in their feedback to improve that they said to maintain and improve on your Silver Bike-Friendly Community Award. BFC reviewers recommend. So there's no requirements. Like I've mentioned before, we have a bike and pedestrian commission. Madison, a platinum city, does not. They've had a bicycle and pedestrian coordinator, but there are different ways to get to the same goal. And ultimately the goal is make your city better for biking and demonstrate that you've done so. And the best way you can demonstrate it's gotten better is by ridership going up. That's kind of the final metric, that if you can show that, hey, we've gone from just under 1% of people regularly commute by bike to 3%, clearly something's working, but they want to see what we've done to get there. So what they did say was update your 2017 bike ped plan by adopting specific measurable goals to better benchmark and track the success of the plan. Establish a dedicated annual budget for implementation of the plan, in addition to funding for ongoing bicycle programming and infrastructure development / maintenance. So one thing that they have discussed with us on phone calls is they said, it would be helpful, again, not a requirement, everything is always very couched in, we recommend, this would help. But it would be helpful for the city to demonstrate in our next application specifically what material investment is being put into biking and pedestrians. And I think that when Steve and Mark led the last application process, they did a pretty good job of this. I probably could have gotten even better data than I did to support them. But if we could pull out from our budget, here's specifically what funding was spent on biking related things, it's difficult to parse out because when you've got a large road project like Cyene, Ross isn't necessarily tracking this % of the Cyene road project was spent on biking and pedestrian infrastructure. But something like that, you know, if we could say that X% of our public works budget is going to bike and pedestrian things, that would help. You know, where they mention establish a dedicated annual budget for implementation of the plan, again, it's tough to parse out because there are parts of Ross's infrastructure budget that are specifically dedicated to improving biking and walking. We're not in our budget requests every year specifically calling out the bike and ped plan, but there are things that are in our budget that are specifically to improve things that have been identified in it. So you can see there are things that we could maybe try to find a better way to pull out the data and call it out to the bike league. There's nothing where they require us to do any specific updates. But there are things that we could maybe do to better demonstrate here's how we're working to implement it.
Thanks, Steve and Phil.
Okay, is there any further discussion on the resolution before us? Seeing none. All those in favor of recommending resolution R-174-25 for approval signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. Okay. That resolution is recommended for approval. Just say thank you to everyone involved in the process.
Yep.
Thanks to all the members of the commission who were involved in this. Thank you also to Bike Fitchburg.
And again, to Mark, especially for kicking this off months before the actual process began, which I know as Kelly mentioned, regular review is really helpful in that it was very overwhelming. This process, it's a big plan, but at least getting started in conversations earlier made it a lot more digestible. So I appreciate that foresight.
Thanks to you as well, Phil, and Ross isn't here, but if you could pass on our.
And Dakota did a lot of work with
yes.
those maps. We still got a little bit more to improve in those final edits, but yep, I'll let them know.
Thank you. Item 4B is update from the Governor's Bicycle Coordinating Council. This won't take very long. We did have our most recent meeting in December. Just a couple of items wanted to flag for this group. So the Department of Transportation is in the process of updating their active transportation plan document 2050. They do things on a little longer scale than we do here, since we're just speaking about how frequently we update plans. And so part of it is previously DOT had separate plans they had a bicycle plan, they had a pedestrian plan. They're trying to coordinate all those together into a single active transportation plan. They are actually getting very close to finalizing that. They're also in the process of finalizing their design standards for bicycle and pedestrian facilities, which is the standard that DOT would use on any of their projects. So if you're thinking like state highways or any projects in which they're funding, which does sometimes impact Fitchburg where we're receiving a grant from DOT, we do need to follow their design guidelines. I can send a copy of kind of where the current drafts are to Phil if it'd be helpful. As well as I think Fitchburg to an extent does a lot of its own planning because it's a big enough community, but I think it's also important with the design standards because a lot of smaller communities that don't have their own dedicated engineering departments tend to fall back on what DOT recommends for design standards.
Especially because of the places where we've got interfaces with state trails that understanding those design standards is good to try and align those as best we can.
And then two other things, I might see if I can get some additional speakers to come to us. We did have an update on a statewide bicycle and pedestrian counting pilot program that is occurring primarily in the Milwaukee area, where they're using trail counters to actually go through and count bike and ped trips, but then they're using sort of a statistical model to try to determine based on what we're seeing at these specific locations and actually map out what does the larger bike and ped network look like. So it was kind of a combination of like engineering and computer science faculty at UW-Milwaukee who are working on this to try to generate this sort of interactive map and then actually have it update in real time so that as counters were seeing things, they could try to help. But one thing they might be interested in is, since we do have counters, they're always looking for data. And so to the extent that we might be able to partner with them and just say, either here's our data when we collect it so that it's something that they can help build into their model as they look to expand to a more statewide footprint. Also additionally, I think they're looking to place some of their own recording equipment that might be able to figure out where we have gaps within our own county network.
Do you know what type of counters they have? Something fancier than a single infrared beam?
I believe it is. I believe they're using Echo Counter for it.
If they're using Eco Counter,
Echo
that,
Counter.
yeah. That'd be a lot more.
Do our counters report anything like over a network, or is it like you go up and manually read the number that it has on it?
Our counters, you manually go up and you connect a little portable hub to it and then come back and import that data into the computer. It's very basic. It basically counts the number of times the infrared beam was broken. It doesn't differentiate between bikes, skateboards, pedestrians, deer. So we know how much traffic there is. Now, of course you figure, except in maybe December, the vast majority of your incidents that you record are gonna be cyclists and pedestrians. But we don't know what it is between those. So we know generally traffic on the 7 locations where we have those counters. We don't know directionality or type of traffic. We just know how much use in general the trails get. So something like Echo Counter, I don't know how they pronounce it. They've got equipment that is better able to track directionality and mode of transit. The one counter that Steve recommended we place here at the library facing Lacey Road from Telram does track type of transportation, whether it's pedestrian or two-wheeled or a car. But yeah, the Trafex ones are pretty dumb. So they give a general vague sense.
I know this has been brought up before, but just to offer one more time, I know if there's a desire to collect this data more frequently, as commissioners, I'm happy to jump on a rotation to help collect that data. And if it helps initiatives like this that we can report back more frequently, happy to do
Duly
that.
noted. Yeah, but went out with Mark and Andy and Steve, kind of showed them the ropes, and certainly if you're interested, we could expand that. I gotta get a can of Raid for the.
Yeah, so bring wasp spray. We've determined that.
I've had spider and ant issues before, but last year was the first time that wasps were a problem.
Nice.
And then the one other note, DOT was contracting also with UW-Milwaukee with Bob Schneider, who's a faculty member there in their planning department, to update bike and pedestrian crash and injury data.
Okay.
And so he has kind of statewide data he has a little more kind of granular results that could help. And I know that was something that Kelly had been asking about, was sort of like bike and ped crash data. So
Yeah,
an opportunity to bring him in.
would that be different from what the TOPS lab at UW has, do you know? Like a
I think
different data
his-
source?
I think his is more detailed than what they have.
Okay.
TOPS Lab really just records, there was an incident and it involved this mode of transportation.
Yep.
He gets much more into like actually taking the police reports and like determining direction of travel, conditions, was it after dark and
Okay,
the cyclist didn't have lights on, or the driver was impaired.
Oh, that would
Like,
be
he's
really
got much
interesting.
more.
yeah, that's a lot more variables to include.
So, I think for his purposes, he looks at it on a statewide basis, because otherwise you're dealing with such small subsets of data that looking at just Fitchburg crashes probably isn't going to tell you that much, but it is helpful to kind of hear from a statewide perspective of here's globally what we're seeing, these are what are causing bike and ped crashes. And then he also, I believe TOPS Lab really just, and I take it back, I think they do indicate severity of crash, like if it's a fatality versus a serious injury, but he also looks at that of like, what are the factors that are going into sort of minor crashes that are causing injury versus crashes that are causing severe injury versus crashes that are causing fatalities, and like really digging into what are the causes behind them. So I think it would be potentially an opportunity. I've talked to him, he would be interested in coming to speak to the group, so. But that is all I had, just kind of on the Governor's Bike Council, if there are any questions on that. Otherwise, we can move on to 5A, which is the council update. So if you had anything?
There are no updates on my behalf. Thank you.
Thank you. 5B is the staff update to the commission.
Not much. I think we already discussed last year that the Cyene construction project was done, so that whole thing is open now. We'll have a little bit more opportunity as it gets warmer to talk about other public works projects. I'll bring Ross in and at the next meeting to try to bring him in, at least get an update from him. But yeah, there's not much else. I know the Nine Springs Interceptor project that MMSD is doing is gonna commence this year. That's gonna be over by Goose Lake area, so we'll make sure we're getting updates on any impacts to the bike and pedestrian network when that happens. But no schedule has been released for that yet.
Any questions for Phil?
Yeah, Phil, just one question. I know like last fall, I believe it was, we were celebrating the kind of final phase of B-cycle rollout.
Yes.
Just curious, moving forward, if we do onboard new neighborhoods and new development, is it B-cycle that approaches us saying, hey, we'd love to put one here, or do we reach out to them, or how does that kind of work now that we've completed the main rollout?
So at this point, a lot of that main rollout was funded by a TAP grant from the Wisconsin DOT. That TAP grant is tapped. So at this point, any future B-cycle stations B-cycle would look for a sponsor to pay for that installation, for the capital cost of the docks and the bikes. My guess is because the city put right around $100,000 into this initial stage, which was quite a bit more than B-cycle had kind of indicated they thought we would need to. The city may not be as interested in, I don't want to speak for anyone, maybe they will, but B-cycle will look for a sponsor, whether that's the city or private businesses. I know there's some private businesses they've reached out to in the past and might court them again. I could reach out to my contacts at B-cycle and say, hey, here's a spot that would be really valuable. Have you thought about talking to such and such? But the city is kind of stepping back from leading that because of the depletion of the grant. And so if B-cycle is looking to expand in Fitchburg more, it's more likely that it'll be them doing that or a sponsor reaching out to them and saying, hey, I'm interested in this. With new neighborhoods, it's less likely that they would put docks in a neighborhood because they really are looking for kind of multi-use locations where you've got residential, you've got park use, you've got commercial, things like that. So it'd be great to have B-cycle docks close to my home, but there's not really any other utility to the network.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
I guess to that point, especially as more and more projects are happening along the North Fish Hatchery corridor, especially as single-story, single-use buildings are coming down and multi-use buildings are going in. I think that's probably a good conversation to have with the developers.
Yep, that would be good. And one of the big sales pitches during the grant period was that sponsors that came in were going to be able to get, because of the matching dollars from the grant, sponsors were going to be able to get stations cheaper at that point than at any other time. So they can still approach developers and businesses. It'll just be a little bit higher price point than was offered 2 years ago. We've got that development along Fish Hatchery. There's still more going in kind of over in Uptown between Terabessa and the East Sherrill area. There's a new development being planned for over at South Stoner Prairie. So they're definitely, there's a lot more growth coming in Fitchburg and potential for B-cycle, but they've got to find somebody to come to the table.
Steve, maybe you and I can have a conversation offline of how we best approach those. Just thinking on some of these projects, and to your point about cost, but at the same time, if you're putting in a multi-million-dollar building, what's the cost of
20,000 more?
Yeah, what's the cost of a few docks? You're building your financial plan to put the project together, but hitting them on the front end prior to shovels going in the ground.
Yeah.
Okay, if there's nothing else on the staff update, move on to item 5C, the Bike Fitchburg update. Zane.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yesterday was the deadline for getting things into the statewide bike fed calendar to be in the printed ride guide that was going out in April. So we have been working on our schedule for the year. We will have 6 rides for Joe, a Bratfest Biker Brought to Work ride. We will again cooperate with the chamber on the brewery tour. Pick me up at the border will happen in September. Next up will be, so we'll have a commuter station on International Winter Bike to Work Day. That is February 13th. Come by the Velo Underground for hot coffee and bagels. That is a Friday. Normally we do these things on Tuesday, so we're moving it to Friday because we discovered that we were the only ones celebrating Wisconsin Winter Bike Week. So we're going to move from that Tuesday to the corresponding Friday to get in sync with the international movement.
It's a lucky day.
What?
It's a lucky day, it's Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th comes on Friday this month. Organizationally, Bike Fitchburg has been serving as the financial agent for 2 other efforts. One of them is the Cycling Without Age Fitchburg, and one of them is the Kyle Stigert Memorial Greenway along the Cap City Trail. One of those has already been spun off as a separate corporation, and we expect in the next month or 2 its 501c3 determination. And so that's the Kyle Stigert Greenway. They have also undertaken another fundraising drive and raised an additional $15,000 to finance the improvements and the maintenance along there. Over the winter, we've had 2 herbicide, or fall and winter, we've had a burn and 2 herbicide applications. And after tree removals, there's a maintenance agreement between the city and the corporation that is going through commissions and committees. I don't think it's coming here, but it's going to the Park Commission and the Tree Advisory Committee. And when that agreement, when the resolution has been signed to allow the mayor to enter into the agreement, then we'll remove some trees and get the prairie seed down. And then this spring, we hope to get the path and benches and the bicycle repair stand and parking in down there. Cycling Without Age is that international program to give rides to people who cannot ride bikes on their own using electric tricycles with front bench seats called trishaws. And we are up to about $8,000 on that effort to raise $40,000 for 2 trishaws and a trailer. We're likely to buy the trailer first because we have a loan of one of the Bike Fed's trishaws for 2026. And we'll be starting up giving rides in May. That corporation is a little farther behind, but will still be launched and separate from Bike Fitchburg this week, this spring. We enjoyed getting together at the Gear Shift Gathering with other bike nonprofits over at Wisconsin, Bikes for Kids Wisconsin last week, followed by the Brazen Dropouts Bike Swap. I did want to remark quickly on the B-cycle expansion. We are pursuing B-cycle expansion as part of our business outreach program, which we have in cooperation with the Chamber and the city. Businesses and other organizations get credit on their bicycle-friendly business application for supporting biking at the national, state, and local levels. And so a organization like the Chamber, who sponsored a B-cycling station, that is something that we can tell them is a good thing. The other thing I can share is that I discussed with the mayor earlier last year that we tend to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on TIF projects to do things like subterranean geotechnical remediation and supporting underbuilding parking and other kinds of things like that. And we should not be sponsoring projects with city funds that do not have B-cycle stations in. And she agreed with that. And so she said that she would direct staff to include B-cycle stations in future TIF development projects. Now, we have not seen that happen yet, but I think her heart is in the right place. She's very busy, but I think that that's a really good opportunity. For example, the 7-story mixed-use building that will be on Fish Hatchery Road would be an ideal place. It will be a rounding error in their total project cost and even in the cost of the TIF contribution. So this is a good way to expand B-cycle as new development proceeds. I just wanted to bring up one thing that will be of interest from the statewide bike fed front. The Route of the Badger has been a cooperative experiment or project between the Bike Fed and the Rails to Trails Conservancy and covered the southeast 7 counties of Wisconsin to develop, to further develop and complete a 700-mile trail network across those counties. And it has been so successful. Well, where Rails to Trails has a staffer stationed in Wisconsin that works on this full time. And they are at the Wheel and Sprocket store in Bayview where the Bike Fed has its offices. And it's been so successful that they are expanding it statewide. And so that will be, the Route of the Badger will be a theme to complete and extend our trail network statewide, and that will certainly benefit and affect Fitchburg. So that's what I wanted to report. Any questions about our activities? Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And we are on to item number 6, which is announcements. The next meeting will be on April 1st. Are there any further announcements? Seeing none, move on to item number 7, which is adjournment.
Adjourn.
Motion by Joe, is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned. See people in April, if not sooner.
Enjoy this sub-zero weather coming up. Negative.